Pavlo, warmest welcome to the Genius Leadership Podcast.
Thanks for having me. So thanks for having me, Anna.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And Genius Leaders, just for you, for context, I actually found Pavlo, this is the first time we went meeting in real time online, but I found him through one of his posts on LinkedIn, where he was talking about his bootstrapping journey. And I thought he brought some perspective that was very refreshing for my feed. So I really wanted to have a conversation and dive deep into his journey. But before we go into the journey itself, maybe Pavlo, you can introduce yourself. What do you think is important for our listeners to understand about you and your background?
Oh man, that's such a hard question. Yeah, I'm an entrepreneur since recently. I co-founded this business called Massima.me, which is essentially a marketplace where families are being matched with STEM tutors. We have customers from now 62 countries,
Oh,
and we are especially big in my home country, Ukraine, and also Poland. Numbers wise, we are now doing 44,000 lessons a month, which is a monstrous number if you think about it. We work with 900 tutors around the world, and we have slightly under 8,000 families who work with us on the regular, let's say, weekly basis. Prior
wow.
to that, I helped to build products in companies like Wise.com, which is a massive publicly traded fintech out of London, and also Prepper.com, which is a well-known Ukrainian startup focused on tutoring business, language tutoring business in the US.
Amazing numbers, 62 countries. That's something I actually would like to talk about as well today. How do you actually reach those countries and others? Are those mainly Ukrainians throughout the countries or what? But also the numbers. You said 44,000 and around 900 mentors or tutors. That means around 50 lessons per month per average for all the tutors if everyone was working on an equal basis. That creates a lot of opportunities and a lot of work for the tutors. That's freaking amazing. Congrats for that.
Yeah, and well, I'm really excited that you mentioned that because when we started, what we really wanted to focus on is making sure that tutors, that we do not just build another platform where tutors can sign up and just sit there and wait until the first booking comes. We wanted to create a platform where they can consistently get business and where they can consistently work and generate like reasonably high income, right? Because the problems that all platforms, all businesses like ours normally have is that tutors just don't get enough bookings from one platform. So they need to kind of sit on multiple platforms, which means they build zero loyalty to every platform and they don't really care about your product. And ultimately, what we started doing is that instead of just onboarding everyone who wanted to create an account with us, we would kind of do, well, let's call it a pre-screening, right? Like a process that allows us to distinguish tutors that we really want to onboard in the first place and make sure that through the first few weeks of their work with us, we manage to sell out up to 80% of their time, the time
Wow.
that they granted to platform. Obviously, like I would not lie, not always it works like that. And obviously, we have some tutors that we need to say goodbye in the end of this like few weeks period. But in the grand scheme of things, like pure math, like this very like low level calculations that you've just done, tells us the story, right? We kind of managed to make tutors busy on the platform, which means they generate decent income with us, which means down the line they stick around for longer.
Amazing. So many things we can discuss here, but let's start with. No, actually, I want to say on the tutors. How do you make sure that they stick around? How do you actually work with those couple of your weeks to get them booked as much as possible? So you said the goal is 80% of the time that they allocated for the platform. What do you do in practice to do that? Because, and now why I'm asking that, because quite a lot of entrepreneurs forget about the customer, especially if they start going the raising funds externally. I talked to some founders last week at the Web Summit, and they say you become like your investors become your customer, and you get so many layers of customers until the end user, and you just get a huge gap, and you get detached from them. And I think what you're talking about, your front and center goal was actually to engage your customer. Of course, you have two kinds of customers, right? The families and the tutors. But without the tutors, enough tutors on the platform, you don't have the reason for the families to stick around. So how did you focus on them? What did you do in practice to actually get them to stick around?
Well, I would say it was rather simple. We kind of knew that as a platform, when we were just starting, we didn't have anything to offer, right? And we just knew that families, in the end, what they care about is being matched with a tutor that will care about their kids and will care about helping their kids to excel. Obviously, we could have claimed that we're going to build some fancy AI powered features that would allow kids to learn better, whatever. And I know many companies that exist who are succeeding in this, but we kind of took this path of tutors focused learning, right? So we knew that we needed tutors from the get-go, but obviously, just as I said in the beginning, we had nothing to offer to them. Like we didn't have a platform, we didn't have a product. Like, why would they work with us? So instead of going wide and broad, what we started doing, we started to onboard like a few tutors. I think we started with like two or three. And before we sold them out, we didn't onboard anyone else.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then we onboard more tutors. And before we sold them out, we didn't onboard anyone else. And it was a purely like manually orchestrated process, right? We didn't really automate anything. It was just humans making calls to other humans, making deals like, and scheduling lessons for the tutors that we managed on board. And just like that, slowly but surely, we were getting more and more tutors who were interested in working with us because obviously this community is very tight if you think about it, right? Like on papers, there are obviously many teachers, but we only teach STEM subject and we are solely focused on mathematics right now, which means they spread the word. They talk to other tutors or like students or someone who is knowledgeable about math but is looking for an additional income, and they spread the word. And down the line, they just bring more and more friends, more and more tutors. They share their success stories in their like social communities, in their sort of support groups, etc. And we kind of spread like a virus in the beginning, especially in Ukraine, because we were different from other platforms. Instead of just coming and waiting there for something for your fish to come, for a fish to be caught, they, after being onboarded, started to receive their business straight away. And I think for them it was a bit of a aha moment where they understood, okay, maybe they take higher commissions than other platforms do, but at least I'm sure that I get my students during the hours when I'm ready to teach, because most of our tutors, they are real math teachers, right? So which means they work in the traditional educational system, which means they're busy from, let's say, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. And it's like starting 4 p.m. till, let's say, 10 p.m. they can teach. So if we fail to fill their schedule, it means it's an opportunity lost for them, right? They cannot just somehow manage to get this hours back. They cannot just extend the next day, right? We just need to sell out today. The way we think about it is a bit like um, running a grocery warehouse where you have, let's say, 10,000 kilograms of potato, right? Or maybe potato is a bad example. Let's say 10,000 kilograms of strawberries, right? And strawberries go bad super quickly. So if we don't sell them out today, no one will eat this tomorrow. That's the same way we try to approach tutors' hours. We know we have like that many hours today. We really need to make sure that we sell out the most of them. Otherwise, tutors are unhappy and they will start to look for other platforms to make their revenue from, or maybe they will start looking for students themselves, which is, again, a very legitimate way to run a tutoring business. And being completely honest, if as a tutor, you know how to attract students, you know how to build your marketing, then probably you don't really have a need in the platform like that. But the truth is, most of the tutors, they are good in teaching, but they're bad in marketing, which is good for us.
Mm.
So that's why we sort of keeping our customer in mind and having this analogy of running a grocery warehouse. We just build the systems that now allows us to distribute hours quite efficiently. And for the longest time, it was the only tags that we were building. And even now, like being 3 years in, still our main product is focused on tutors. We have this gamification system for tutors. We have like a really robust calendar management system for tutors. We have some other features that only tutors are using. When our customers offering, like families offering, is really poor, I would say it's really weak right now, just because we've never really focused on them, right? We
Mm,
use it as long as we can match them with the right supply, as long as the right tutor shows up to the lesson, yeah, we gonna excel. Like they will be happy, right? Because that's down the line what they care about.
mm.
Tutors, they have so many different needs, so many different challenges, that we had to build stuff that helps them to excel.
I love this perspective and how you really double down on the focus that you identified for yourself. And and I appreciate, Pavlo, that you say like, okay, there was no AI, there was very manual work, human to human, picking up the phone. This is so unsexy in the tech world nowadays, and people overlook it, and people think like, okay, shy away from that, or even if they do, they shy away from talking about it. But I bet you learned so much, and your platform
Yeah.
has become so much better from that experience. So can you tell us about some learnings that you got from that early on, onboarding just a couple of tutors per time, doing it very manually, and how did that actually transition or translate into the platform, like in the tech part later on?
That's a great question. So I think the first thing is that we didn't really know how to do matching in the beginning, right? We just knew that we have some tutors who work with us, but at the same time, all these tutors look the same from the very beginning, right? Like you are a math tutor, and this guy is a math tutor, and this woman is a math tutor, and they all look the same, like very homogenic. And then when we started to talk to customers trying to make these deals, what we realized quite early is that every family is sort of unique in its own way. Like, I would not say challenges are different all the time, but at the same time, these challenges are quite, there's a great variety of them, right? And if you just tell them, hey, we help with mathematics, it really tells them nothing, right? What they really want to make sure about is that, hey, will my children pass a course test, right? Will they be able to, excel in the final exam? Or will they, just not stop to struggle with homework? And what we realized as well is that on every age, like at every stage of their school journey, kids have different struggles and parents have different struggles as well. And what parents want when they have kids of like 5 years old, 7 years old is very different from what parents want when they have like 18 years old or 17 years old,
Mm,
which obviously made a thing that we need to make sure that we know how to structure, like how to bucket all these potential problems and requests and address them with our tutors. Like, for instance, what we discovered, which was super funny, is that the trigger moment for a mom to start look for a tutor is when she struggles to explain fractions to their kids. And
mm.
it's always fractions because
Okay.
for adults, it's just so simple and so easy to grasp this concept of fractions that it almost goes without kind of saying, right? So you kind of just understand it. But if you think about it, it's a bit of a mental struggle to explain it if you're not trained to explain it, right?
Mm,
So what we realized is that, yeah, fractions is a big thing. Second thing that we realized is that moms, well, a lot of moms, they do not necessarily care. They not only care about children results, but what they care about. Sometimes they hire tutors just to free some space for themselves.
mm,
So it's not only we sell education, right? But we also sell a temporary relief to parents. And obviously, we kind of structured our marketing around this. And obviously, we started to use these messages, which were like, hey, you know, make time to make this tomato tart or whatever, like raspberry tart, in order to, yeah, whilst your kids do math with us, stuff like that. And
mm,
without talking to them, without sort of figuring out this insights by trying to sell them over the phone, we would never ever see that, right? Well, we
Mhm.
would obviously, like, again, don't get me wrong, at some point we could have come up with something like that, or could have realized that it works this way by just running multiple creatives, by just analyzing the CTRs and all the technical metrics related to performance marketing. But what I think happened is that by just talking to them straight away, we realized what actually works and what are the emotional triggers and what are the rational triggers. And it helped us to structure marketing quite a lot. And then on the product side, answering your question, how it's translated into tech, basically the first feature that we built was a very robust catalog of tutors that we would not even show to our customers. So when our customers come to a website, they see a typical marketplace sort of page, right? With some limited amount of data about the tutor. But what happens in the background is that every tutor has like at least 40 metrics that we assess for them.
Wow.
And we use these 40 metrics in order to facilitate the perfect match for the families that comes. And so far it works quite well. I mean, for some ages it works better than from other ages, but it works. And we came up with all these metrics that we started to evaluate based on the conversations that we had in the beginning and are still having. Like most of our deals are still being done over the phone. It's just the
Oh,
scale of it is way bigger than it used to be.
interesting. Okay, so then I'm curious um, how many sales reps you have, or SDRs, whatever you call that team, and then also um, how do you actually find the parents to give a call to?
Yeah, we now have around 40 sales representatives
Wow. Mhm.
across multiple markets. And it's a very powerful, like it's a very important part of our business. And yeah, it's basically an engine that drives our growth.
Mm.
But answering your second questions, well, it's both simple and is not. So historically, we started with Facebook being our main acquisition channel,
Mhm.
and for years it stayed this way. But this year we managed to actually decrease our dependency on Facebook. And now a good chunk of our customers come from Google Ads, a good chunk of our customers comes from organic social. Like for instance, our Instagram account in Ukraine now has more than 50K followers. Most of them are moms, and
Mm.
it drives quite a bit of sales. Then SEO slowly but surely started to drive some growth. So yeah, I would say that even organic TikTok brings some leads.
Okay. Mm.
So I would say that we just experiment with channels in a relatively structured way. And our main goal was making sure that if something goes off with Facebook, which is very likely, you never know when it's gonna stop, right? You never know when you gonna run out of new creative materials. You
Mm.
still have channels to fall back on. And Facebook at some point was so important to us that my co-founder basically at some point he spent probably 2 months of his life just figuring out how this creative process for Facebook ads works, like how to come up with a new idea, how to test a new creative material, how to scale creatives production, etc., etc. And probably because of him we managed to really crack this channel. Obviously then we hired really smart people who now help us in scaling, but in the beginning when we were just starting, it was really helpful to have someone from the founding team really focused on that, because if there's a channel that brings you customers, you better understand this channel, right?
Hell yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And we
And
had
have it inside of the team. As you said, you can of course hire someone and outsource the tech knowledge. But what I think the value of your co-founder digging deep into that was he knows what you're building.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then
no,
he learns the drills of what works on a platform. So yeah,
yeah,
he translates your goals, the impact you want to create into those drills. And when you
yeah,
hire someone without clear understanding what exactly you want to bring, how you want
yeah,
to come across as a brand, etc., it never works. I've tried it, I failed. I've talked to founders who tried it and failed.
yeah.
You need to be the one who actually
Yeah,
translates
I
that.
think the main problem when you transition from being an operator to being an entrepreneur is that you really need to understand every aspect of your business in a great level of detail. And even if you hire someone, you need to understand exactly what their job is going to be. I mean, obviously, I think at some level, when you're really big and successful and you hire like hundreds of people, etc., as a founder, you can afford not to do that, right? It's just why would you know in every level, like in a very granular level of detail, what people are up to on every, like at every level of your business. But whilst you are still under, let's say, 100 people, I think you really need to understand what everyone's day to day is. And I would say that for the long time, we played this game where we're like, oh, let's just try to hire smart people and let them figure out what to do. And let's make sure that our culture helps us to move forward. But I really don't think that it's a good way to go, especially when you're early stage. I think the smaller you are, the scrappier you are, the better. And I think that you really need to do two things, maybe three things: hire capable people, set ambitious goals, and keep people accountable.
Mm,
And if people do not deliver, you need to replace them. That's the only way. So it's not about like, I think in the beginning, it's not necessarily about the cultures that you're building, and it's not necessarily about just everyone having a good time, but it's more about make sure stuff gets done, because that's what keeps you afloat. Maybe at some point when you're big and you have a bit more of a slack and you can afford a bit more chill pace, then it's gonna change. But so far, I think it's through things. People who can do the work, who can do the job, people who are accountable, and people who are driven by goals.
mm.
That's what helps us to be where we are now.
Mm, I love it. And I'll go back to the accountability point because I think this is something super tough for entrepreneurs sometimes, how to
Yeah.
really hold people accountable. But before that, let's actually roll back. When you were starting the platform or the company, why did you decide to go bootstrapping? And like, what were these decisions there that you had to make? What kind of questions did you ask yourself in that process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for context, we started in 2021. And in 2021, VC landscape was completely different.
Mm,
Where when we just started and we both are relatively well connected in the tech world, we started getting investment offers straight away. Like literally, we didn't have a product. We barely had customers. Our marketing spend was maybe 500 USD a month, so not much. And from the get-go, people just were throwing money at us, which was completely nuts if you think about that now. And because of that, we decided not to take this money because we were like, okay, if it's so easy, whilst we are still so small, maybe we shouldn't even bother with it. Let's grow a bit. Let's make sure we get to a decent level and then potential raise when we really need this money. And that was our initial thinking.
mm,
Then in 2022, the war in Ukraine started, and obviously all financial markets went south. And what happened after that? Yeah, at some point after that, we tried to fundraise, and it was not as easy
mm,
as well as it could have been a year before. So then we just decided not to raise anymore because we spent probably 2 months full time
mm,
having this as a main focus. We managed to close a half of the amount we wanted to raise, and we decided to leave this money on the table because otherwise we just didn't see back then how to close around. And I reflecting on this, I think it was a smart decision back then because it helped us to rethink how we were building this business and what we thought was important for us, and helped us to make decisions, like tough decisions, like letting go people, cutting our expenses, slowing down our growth, etc., that we would otherwise, I mean, probably would have not done it,
mm,
and we would have just ended up spending investors' money and burning this cash, because we burned quite a bit of cash during the fundraise. We basically, our strategy was, okay, we made some money throughout our first year of existence. We also raised 100K from Google as a non-dilutive investment. Let's just throw this money and speed up our growth, try to build momentum, and make sure that we raise as a result of this momentum, right? And then we figure this out. And now, obviously, as I'm telling you this, it sounds like ridiculous and stupid. But back then, it didn't sound that stupid to us because I feel that's what the game most of the businesses played. And it didn't look as dangerous as it looks to me right now. So we found ourselves we've been super tired, spending all our money, being like very negative on the P&L and not being able to raise what we wanted to raise. So that's why in the end we just had to cut our expenses. And now we have a relatively healthy business on our hands. Now we have a relatively functional team, and we are now 2 or 3 times bigger than we were when we tried to fundraise, which basically tells me is that maybe it was a good thing that we failed to do it back then, right? Because ultimately, I'm not entirely sure we would have slowed down our growth back then if we raised. And maybe by that moment of time, our business would not even exist anymore, right? Because if we just continued to spend with the same speed as we used to do it back then, yeah, I just don't know if it was sustainable. I'm not sure if it answers your question, but I think it was not our thoughtful decision of, hey, let's do bootstrapping. Our decision was let's just make a solid business, right? And just because raising looked so simple to us back then when we started, we didn't really consider this as a straightaway option. We just wanted to postpone it, but we delayed it to an extent where it was no longer a viable funding option for us.
For good and for bad, as you said. But I'm so curious. First of all, you said that you had quite a good year, first year. Were you profitable year one?
Yeah, I think we were like low key profitable, like on the
Wow.
P&L. So basically, it depends on how you do your accounting, right? The right
Yeah.
way of doing accounting in this type of business is that your sales is basically your deposits, right? And then you only recognize your revenue when you deliver on your service.
So
But
cash,
yeah, but
in a way.
during the first year, what we did was building P&L, yeah, basically taking our take rate from the future lessons that we're gonna provide from the sales that we made and recognize that as profit. Like kind of this type of account. So yeah, like by that type of accounting, we were relatively profitable, right? Obviously, these days we do it based on revenue, like when we actually deliver the service, but still, like it really depends on on
Got it.
how you look at
Yeah.
numbers.
Thanks
But
for the
yeah,
transparency.
even on revenues this year, like we are profitable. So and mostly because most of our employees are in Ukraine. So we have to pay Ukrainian wages that are still smaller than they are in Europe, and also because yeah, because we don't build dumb shit, right? We just build what our customers really need. And because we started in this very manual process where we had humans doing all the processes, we know exactly what brings pain and what's complicated and what needs to be automated. So instead of reinventing the wheel every quarter, we have a massive backlog of stuff that needs to be automated. And we just sit in it with engineers and we're like, okay, what's the most problematic bit, you know?
Mm-hmm. I, I think it's so valuable that we come back to this, Pablo, and again with the of the importance of the talking to the customer. You're saying like, okay, you understood the things. Then basically the tech was built based on the real problems that you were facing
Yeah,
as a team and your customers were facing, both the tutors and the families.
yeah,
So you didn't hypothesize and build something that no one needed and no one
yeah,
actually saw value in, but actually
yeah,
that was real value right away as soon as you deploy the stuff.
yeah.
And I
But
was talking to
it's not
yeah.
the right way of building VC businesses.
Yeah.
Just because if you build a VC business, what they want to see is your vision of the future, right?
Mm,
They want to bet on something that is likely to grow big in the future.
mm,
Businesses like ours, I mean, we have like our own VC worlds, right? We have VCs who are keen on business models like that, who are a bit more risk averse and who care about um, I would call it a legitimacy of the business model, right? But probably it's not like necessarily the right term for it. But if you just pitch a traditional VC from the Bay Area, what happens after is that they really assess you whether you could be the next moonshot or not. And businesses like ours, I mean, they could grow real big, but at the same time, it's not necessarily the same explosive growth that some VCs are looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think this is a very important part to discuss, Pavlo, that there are businesses who really fit the VC picture and the model and who would get value out of it. But there are a lot of other businesses that actually I would see VC money and even angel money sometimes as sticks into their wheels.
Mhm.
And this is very important to understand for the founder. And as you said, you've been experienced with being part of the teams who have grown huge products and huge companies. And you went into this full time for 2 months of trying to raise money. And there I always think about it. No founder starts the business and saying like, I want to be raising money full time for 9 months because that's quite often what it takes, right? For
Yeah.
real, it's a full-time job for almost a
Yeah.
year to actually close around. And no one wants that, but a lot of people go that way. And I really appreciate you being honest about your journey, that you have learned something about that, but you still went that way. And I'm curious, knowing what you know right now, would you still do that pain of 2 months of trying to raise money just for the sake of learnings and slowing down or whatever? Or would you have done it differently?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we did. I think what I learned to make it very practical uh, would be the following. First things first, like the moment when you raise is like crucial, right? It's not only about your growth numbers, it's not only about your metrics in general, it's not about your business in general. It's like what the market thinks is hot.
Mm, mm,
And I mean, it's really easy to understand. Just talk to a few, like make some friends who are VC and talk to them and just tell them what did they invest into, what have they invested into recently. And you will get a really good understanding of what's being trendy, right? Like, again, we started to raise after the war started, after OpenAI released the first or whatever, like probably not the first, like GPT-3, right? That was the third
hmm
model that
Yep.
they released. And obviously back then, everyone was screaming that all attacks will be killed by AI. Obviously bullshit, but still a massive belief in the VC world. And you just cannot go against this narrative when you're small. Like for instance, I talked to Praply back then. I was like, how did you manage to raise this massive round like after OpenAI released their model? And they were like, well, because our narrative is that human to human tutoring is here to stay, but with the power of AI, tutors will be able to do more. And for me personally, it sounds like a way more reasonable narrative, right? And that's how I see the market evolve. At the same time, you can tell this to VCs from the position of power, because obviously Preply, the company that I deeply admire, and honestly, I think they have probably one of the strongest founding team coming from Ukraine I've ever personally met. But and they can do it from the position of power. They can be like, look, we are so big right now, right? We raised this like millions before. Those are the people from crazy companies who kind of worked with us. Like we believe this is how the market is gonna sort of evolve. But when you're a small business like us, you come to the same VCs, or like the same VCs who invested into Preply, for instance, and they would look at you like if you are completely nuts, right? Because they have this kind of belief that with all the technological advancement, tutoring business will just disappear. And for us, it was obviously not a lucky moment to raise. I think if we tried to do it straight before the model was released, or even now, we would have very different chances to be successful. And I think my main mistake back then was that I just decided to roll with it. I was like, okay, whatever. Like we don't have to care about whatever's going on with OpenAI. We just need to go ahead and try to race, which was a very dumb decision because it
Mm,
was like swimming against the current, and it didn't really help, right? So we had the war in Ukraine, we had financial markets issue, we had AI, and all of these things didn't play well. They didn't play in our favor.
mm,
So first thing, like the moment of fundraising really, really matters.
mm,
Second thing is it's a numbers game in the end. And I think for especially when you are small, right? Especially when you're raising pre-seed seed, it's definitely a numbers game because what I thought it was, hey, meet a bunch of VCs, build relationships with them, make sure they understand you, make sure they know your business, make sure there's trust, and then try to raise with them. And then I had a funnel of maybe 50, 60 VCs. But what I realized after is that it was just simply not enough to raise what we wanted to raise, right? What I've been told recently is that to close 500K this year, if you are not some super high growth AI, whatever, like former OpenAI employee kind of startup, you need to do like at least 100 meetings with different VCs. So it's like 100 meetings in order to raise 500 USD. Back then, we did 60 meetings. We managed to find 650 in checks. So, I mean, a bit better than average, right? But still, like I would say numbers are comparable. And I think back then I thought that it was a failure when in fact probably it wasn't. It's just because I was so inexperienced as a founder. I kind of took it very personal. I was like, well, there's no fucking way I pitched 60 people and never managed to close, right?
mm,
When and now as my network grew with founders and people who build companies, etc., I kind of understand that this is just the game you need to play, right? And just
mm.
as you said, it's quite often it's a full-time job that you need to sort of get comfortable with. And back then, probably I was not ready to get comfortable with it. So that's my
And
second.
yeah,
Sorry?
I just want to re-emphasize that how important it is to understand the market. First of
Yeah.
all, as you said, it's not even about the company, the traction, etc. Quite often it is about are you the right person, right idea at the right moment to strike
Yeah.
the gold. And secondly, what you said about like having a network of people who are doing similar things, just to understand the game, the rules of the game. What
Yeah.
kind of field are you actually playing in? What kind of game are you playing?
Yeah.
And quite often we just put those standards on us from our own perspective, from very limited understanding of what's going on through some TechCrunch articles, whatever. And that is not the reality. And
Yeah.
understanding the reality can help us so much to stay healthier mentally,
Yeah.
physically on the journey and actually keep going on the journey.
Yeah, it's so true. I wouldn't have said it better myself, to be honest, because indeed, back then, like when you work for a high growth startup or like work for tech companies that I don't know that is publicly trading or like next to become a unicorn or whatever, like a relatively successful story, you barely experience the struggles the founding team how to go through in order to get it there. So when you start to experience issues of the same magnitude firsthand, what happens is that you get really disencouraged really quick, right? Because you are just not used to be attacked from so many different angles by so many issues, right? Because obviously, when you're building a company, it's not only fundraising that keeps you bothered, right? Like you have people issues, you have growth issues, you have, I don't know, tech issues, like you have issues with your customers because nothing works perfectly in the beginning, etc. But you are just so not used to that. And I feel like I was probably lucky before my own business. I worked at companies that were doing relatively well, right? Growing relatively quickly. But, and well, I had experience of starting something from 0 to 1 and like helping other businesses to scale from 0 to 1. But still, back then I worked in companies that were reasonably funded, right? We had like long runway. We didn't really, I would say, we didn't struggle to have just enough money, right?
Mm,
And it's a very different setup. And the operators who want to turn founders, they tend to underappreciate how much effort it actually takes to get something off the ground.
mm. Absolutely. And I'm definitely, and hopefully that shows that the leadership of the companies you've been involved in as operator is good.
Yeah,
If you as an expert in some specific field don't feel all those struggles, it means that the leaders are doing their job. They're creating the
exactly.
environment where you do your job. Our job is to take care that you kind of get your silo of problems. You don't
No,
get
exactly.
exposure to
But,
all of
but,
the
but I think
problems.
the issue is as that as an expert, you never understand that.
Mm,
You
yeah.
really need to check what's on the other side of the fence to understand the level of sacrifices people need to make in order to make your life comfortable, right? This
Mm,
kind of fancy iron chair and your new MacBook did not, just get sort of constructed out of thin air, right? Like there was some money and effort put in order to make it work.
sweat, blood, and tears for sure. So I want to talk. You mentioned it about the growth pains, so that you were growing really quickly with the money that the revenue that you generated in the first year, and also the grant from Google, and you wanted to kind of keep riding that growth, and you were happy that you didn't raise funds to not continue that growth trajectory. So what were the pains that you experienced because of that growth, and how did you deal with them?
Yeah, mostly it's hiring people too quickly and firing people too slowly.
Mm,
Because as you grow fast and your number grow fast, you sort of undermine the importance of having people abroad that could actually sustain this growth. So sometimes your growth, what I'm trying to say is that sometimes your growth happens not because you have the right team, but sometimes your growth happens because your product has a good product market fit.
mm,
And I think that, I mean, it's better than having no product market fit and a good team, to be honest. So we were still in a very privileged
mm,
position. And it was not like our team was like completely wrong. It was like we had some people who were supposed to play critical roles, but were probably not ready, and probably were at wrong stages of their careers to do that kind of job.
mm,
And as our numbers were growing still, it took us too long to make decisions to either change people or replace people or just take people who did one role and just reallocate them to a different part of the business. So I think that was the main issue, that we hired too quickly and we let go people too slow.
mm. it, it's something that I hear from so many founders, and you can talk about it as much as you want, but I think you have to experience it yourself to go through those pains to really learn the lesson. But from your learning the lesson, Pavlo, how like what can be done better? So would you focus as a founder now again, like going through that, to hire slowly, to fire quicker, like more slowly
Yeah.
hiring, quicker firing. What is the first thing that people could work on
I
to?
mean, there's so much written about that, but the problem is that this device never works for your particular setup, right? Because if you are underfunded, you simply cannot hire everyone you want.
Mm,
If you have lots of money on your account, you simply don't care that much about efficiency,
mm,
right? And I think if there's one advice that I could give to founders at any stage, is that make sure that everyone's work is visible and you
mm.
have good means of tracking everyone's performance.
How do you
So,
do that?
well, we just have a spreadsheet that we assemble on the quarterly basis. This spreadsheet has every goal of every person, and we do check-ins on this spreadsheet twice a month. So
Mm,
basically, we have 6 control points throughout the quarter where we try to see if we are moving according to the trajectories that we agreed on. And if something goes off, which it obviously does quite often, we can make adjustments as we go. So that's basically the main tool. Like this spreadsheet, it's basically an OKR tracking spreadsheet, and it doesn't need to be a spreadsheet if you can afford like some sophisticated software to do your OKRs or whatever framework you use in order to set your goals. Use it. But goals need to be visible. People need to commit to these goals, and you need to make sure that you keep people accountable and responsible for the delivery, because obviously every time throughout 3 months something will go wrong and people will fail on delivery somewhere. But if someone does not deliver on any goal you set for them or you agreed on together, it probably means that either the person that you work with is not capable of setting goals, which is bad, probably. It means that probably they don't really understand what their job is, or you just, as a business, have goals that are very unreasonable, right?
Mm,
And I remember I will not call out the brands, but I used to work at this company uh, that had a goal to get 1,000 paying customers after the first months of launching. And we only had, I don't really remember how many, like 2K or 3K, which was not that bad if you think about it. But because their ambition was so high and the amount of money they put into this was so massive, they were really stressed about not hitting the targets. And sometimes it's just your goals are not reasonable, right? Sometimes you set goals that are just too high to be reached. But that's why it always needs to be a balance between someone who is an expert in the field, an expert in the channel, an expert in tech, who understand the problem domain, right? And the founding team, the teams that kind of is responsible in a way to set these ambitious goals and making sure that people who work with them uh, are motivated to deliver on this, are motivated to take this challenge on. But yeah, if your team does not meet the goals, does not necessarily straight away mean that your team is wrong.
mm,
Sometimes the goal is wrong. But
mm,
if you continuously hit the same wall, then probably you need to reassess the way you work.
mm. So, just from my understanding, the spreadsheet, is that one available to everyone on the team? So everyone sees everyone else's
Yeah.
goals on the
Everyone
whole
sees
in the whole
everyone
company.
else's goals, and we have this quarterly meeting when everyone presents on their goals, and we spend probably a month every quarter with every manager on the team iterating on the goals
Mm,
and making sure that goals are as clear as possible,
mm,
making sure that they have everything needed in order to hit the goal, and making sure that we as a founding team, we understand exactly what this person is going to work on.
mm.
So it, it,
That's
it
great.
helps us to be useful as well, because we could offer help, we could offer support, we could offer advice, we could pull people from different companies who are experts,
Mm,
but at the same time it puts responsibility on the person who committed to delivering.
mm. And that transitions to what we discussed, and I said that we'll come back to that later about the accountability, holding people accountable for what they need to deliver. Can we talk more about that? How do you do it in practice? And especially, which is usually the most challenging part, those people who don't stay accountable or don't deliver on what has been agreed and promised, what kind of feedback do you have on them? Do you have any kind of specific process? Okay, first we do this, and then if that doesn't work, then we do this, and then we have to let go of the person if that is not met, or blah blah blah. So how are you working with this accountability? What does it mean in practice on a daily basis, monthly and quarterly?
So we start every meeting with every manager by looking at their goals and the progress that they've made to date.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take marketing team as an example. Our market team has the goals of driving X leads from channel A, Y leads from channel B. So every week we sit with them and we try to understand the progress they made. And we have the percentage of completion per every goal. So it kind of gives us a good understanding of whether we are on track or not. And obviously, sometimes we are not, but that's where we expect a good enough explanation of why we are not meeting the goal. And it could be driven by both internal inefficiencies, but also external factors. And it's good for us to understand what's happening there. But then we really expect the team to make up for it, right? We really expect them to be creative and find ways of still meeting targets. And again, sometimes it does not happen straight away, but at least we should see a dynamics, like a positive dynamics there. If we don't see any positive dynamics, then as a team, we're probably doing something wrong.
Mhm.
And probably answering your question here, we don't have a framework on what to do straight away if the goals are not met. But obviously, whenever we plan our quarter and whenever we look at our hiring plan, if we see that there are people who do not deliver on their goals consistently, we then just yeah, we basically put them on the watch list, right? We
Mm.
we just start of actively thinking to either replace them or potentially give them some external help in order to cope with the challenges that they are facing. Like for instance, we could have someone who is doing a really great work, like they took us from 0 to 1, right? But they struggle to take us from 1 to let's say 10. And not necessarily it means that it's a wrong person, but maybe it's a person who is a bit less experienced, right? So then we try to understand that potentially provide them with some external support, like hire an expert who been there, done that, and could support our team in hitting the targets. But it's more of I would not say it's a one size fits all solution, right? We
Mm.
just look at it on the case by case basis, which I appreciated not the best kind of framework of managing the organization, but we are at that stage where we haven't come up with the frameworks that we could apply across the board.
I think it's a good way of doing it at the stage where you are right now, honestly. And what I hear is a lot about intentionality, so setting those goals, consistency. It's not like you set the goals for the quarter and then the next time you look at them is at the end of the quarter when you're planning the next quarter goals. You're actually looking with that document. It's a living one, right? And that's the thing that really connects the dots, short term, midterm, long term. So that the consistency and communication. So those
Yeah.
three things is what I hear, and I think that's the most important part, or the most important framework to have, really,
Mhm.
at any stage. But also, I think you don't need to over-engineer things. And when when you become thousands of employees, then of course maybe it has to be a bit more um, kind of strict somehow and fixed, just so that you ensure fair treatment of everyone, because you're not having control as much hands-on. But I think at the stage where you are, that's a very good approach to have. Being intentional,
Yeah.
being consistent, and communicating very clearly.
Yeah, I think another way of looking at it would be setting career maps for people.
Mm,
We want to experiment with it in some functions where we would try and understand what would a career map for a particular role look like in, well, if we grow, right? Because
mm,
we need to plan for growth and we need to make sure that people who stay with us, they can see how they could grow with the company.
yeah.
Obviously, it's a bit of an overpromise at this stage because we don't really know whether it's going to happen. But if we put our optimistic hat on, then we will, right? And we need to somehow make sure that people understand what they need to do in order to grow with the company. And we believe that if we implement this framework where, let's say, we have someone who does email marketing and they want to become whatever senior email marketing manager or I don't know, like tech email marketing manager, whatever, then we need to kind of show them how we're gonna help them to achieve that and what we expect from them in order to be considered for that role in the future. At the same time, again, I feel like what's problematic at our stage is that all of these things need to be done by you, right?
Mm,
All of
mm,
these things need to be done by the team who at the same time is pulled in so many different threads that I would not say that we've done a great progress on that, but that's definitely something we're thinking about.
mm. And I guess that's where you can actually hire someone. You're like, okay, start mapping out, start talking to different divisions, or here's our org chart. How do you see the progress, etc. So I think that is part where you can actually get someone not to make that for you, but actually prepare the foundation,
Yeah.
and so that it's easier for you, because that's the kind of things that you can actually outsource to make it happen
Yeah,
without
yeah, and
losing your
potentially
sleep too much.
we might do it at some point when we see
Mm,
that it drives results. Probably we're gonna try it with one function and see if it works. And then if it does, then just as you said, we'll try to roll it out widely.
mm. Wonderful. I'm aware of the time, and I would like to cover one more topic, and that is about now you're having this consistency with the revenue. You have your 8,000 families who work with through the platform on a weekly basis. So you have some recurring revenue, you have some predictability here. So I guess you're out of the survival mode, pure survival mode of taking the company from 0 to 1. So what's next? What are you looking at? How do you transition to maybe building something more midterm or long term from this kind of day to day? Okay, do we have the revenue to pay salaries and keep the lights on?
Yeah, that's a great question. As we discussed in the beginning before we hit the record button, I feel like another problem that companies might face is that you tend to leave from one quarter to another because it's really hard for you to plan long term. You simply have not enough cash to plan more long term. And now, just just as you said, we're a bit out of the survival mode, and we need to learn as a company how to plan more long term, right? What's our playbook of going to new markets? What's our playbook of optimizing our processes? What's our playbook for hiring local teams, et cetera, et cetera? And I would not say that we've done much progress there, to be honest. And our rough idea for the next year would be opening another market. It will be taking our product to a different level where lots of processes that are being done manually are now automated, and making sure that our tutors' life is more comfortable than ever. Because obviously, with all the advancement of AI recently, we do have a lot of avenues to explore on how to empower them to do the best of their work and basically not to be as overworked as they are now, because teaching is hard, right? And we need to make sure that we as a platform provided help. So, and just answering your question, we're gonna probably craft our plan around these three avenues,
Mhm,
making sure we grow as a business by entering new markets, we grow our footprint, we grow our impact, etc. Making sure tutors enjoy to work with us,
mhm,
and making sure we are less and less operationally dependent on people.
mhm. What does it mean for you personally with your mindset, with your approach to start thinking more about that? And so let's talk about mindset, and then I want to talk about the practical parts.
Yeah, it's hard because I'm just not used to that.
Mm,
Again, I worked as an operator for years, and as an operator, like again, it's not like you never set the strategy, but still your strategy is a subject for change, right? And
mm,
it always deviates from the company-wide strategy. And it's probably the first time in my life where I need to think about the company more holistically, like taking
mm,
into considerations avenues I'm not an expert in. Like I'm not an expert in SEO, right? I'm not an expert in legal setup. I'm not an expert in taxation, all these things. But when you put your strategy together, you really need to take all these avenues into consideration. And even fundraising, let's take this as an example. When do we decide that we need to fundraise, right? How should this decision be made? Because, we've managed to grow to where we are now, not raising any external funding. What should be our decision-making process for actually starting a new, as you said, 9 months fundraising process? We don't really have answers to that. And I feel like quite often I feel a bit lost and I feel like a massive imposter.
mm,
And it's scary at times, but then I feel you just need to roll with it, right? Like, do you really have another option?
mm. Yeah, I think one thing that I discussed multiple times last week at the Web Summit was about this, the value of stepping back and taking a break, taking a breather to actually be able to lift your gaze. Because my one line pitch was that I help founders stay sane while they're building. And people were like, oh, so what takes the sanity away most, like first and foremost? And I said, continuously going, building, 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 doing, performing. The value that I bring quite often to my customers is that 1 hour per week when they actually have to just summarize what they've done, what they are doing, what's on their plate, and just by talking through those things
Mhm.
while I'm still keeping my mouth shut, they already see more clarity, they
Yeah.
prioritize easier, and so on. And I think that is something that we can take for ourselves. Can we create that space in our week? Whether it's a longer walk in the forest, whether it is sitting down with another founder and just talking through whether it's hiring some outside help, etc. Whatever it is, just really creating a space for ourselves helps lifting the gaze and starting thinking in a bit of a different terms and getting out of that
Yeah, no,
habit
fair
of
enough.
thinking just now, now.
Yeah, fair enough.
Mm. And anything in practice that you're doing to help yourself and your founding team um, to transition to that more midterm, long-term thinking?
Well, probably you're asking this question too early. I would say
Mm.
we're still in the process of figuring this out.
Okay. I'm looking forward to follow up on that. It's
Yeah, no, I'll
always
let you know
fascinating.
once we have the plan set.
Wonderful. All right, Pablo, this was an hour filled with so many golden nuggets. I really think that no matter which stage the founders are at, they can get a lot of value from what we've talked about because it is about setting the right priorities from the get-go, asking yourself the right questions about is it time to raise? What kind of raise do I want? What kind of investors do I want, etc. What kind of business am I building? Who is my customer? How can I, like, what are their pains? Those questions that seem obvious, but quite often we just forget about them. We start building without actually asking ourselves those questions. And then we have too many struggles to because we've already built something that no one wants. So I really appreciate your journey and your sharing it so transparently. And I'm looking forward to see where you go next because
Yeah,
you've built
absolutely.
something
Yeah.
of great value already. And I think that there's a lot of potential to create even more value for
Yeah.
students, the parents as
Well,
well.
thanks for having me, Anna. I really enjoyed being a part of this pod and well, looking forward to hear from your listeners.
Thanks, Pablo. And to you, Junius leaders, as always, I want to remind you that I see you, I feel you, I love you, and I do believe that you can build something of value that you will enjoy bringing to the world as well. So keep building, keep reflecting on what you're building, and take care. Talk to you next week.